Okay, we'll start. Good evening, good morning, everyone, depending on which part of the world you are in right now. This recording is this webinar is being recorded. If you do not consent to the webinar being recorded, could you please drop in a message, and we will then not upload it to the IPBA website. Otherwise, this webinar will be uploaded on the website of the IPBA. Great, I take that as a yes. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to join you all here on the first Sustainability Café that the IPBA ESG Committee is running. This is the first part of the very many series we're planning to host this year. I'm joined here by our my co-vice chairs, Eric, who's an incoming vice chair, Veronica, Christina. We'd love to discuss all that we've been doing as a committee and our practice area in general with this group today. The idea is for this to be very different than a webinar. We want to keep this conversation very conversational and not one-sided discussion at all. And that's the purpose, to have an informal conversation. Essentially, to discuss today's theme specifically is to discuss how can we transpose ESG into our practice areas and what other avenues can we tap so that this practice area can become a flourishing practice area and a mainstream practice area. Eric, Christina, Veronica, please feel free to introduce yourselves, and we can definitely take it forward from there. Eric, you want to go first?
Yes, sure. So the last few seconds, I had a bad line. So you said you introduced yourself, or sorry? Yeah, I'm Eric.
I can hear you.
So you can hear me, or you can't hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, it seems to have some technical issues here, but now it seems to work. Yeah, nice to see you all, and thank you, Pavi, for the planning of this event. I think it's a great idea to catch up a bit, and I mean, you shared some thoughts about what we should maybe discuss during our coffee or catch up today. I'm sitting here in Germany, and as many of you might know, there are a lot of things going on in Germany and the European Union regarding ESG-related topics. So we still see new legislations coming into place, and apart from that, we see that at least regarding our client base is struggling more and more with fulfilling the different compliance requirements when it comes to ESG-related laws and legislation in the different regions of the world. So I would say, 2 years ago it was pretty easy because you could tell every client, so you can try to be best in class, and then you are on the safe side. And you might have a big advantage when it comes to promoting your products and stuff like that. Yeah, so you are one of the good people then. And so things have changed a bit, starting in the US, but also now to some extent in China, for example, where we see that we have legislation there in place that aims or aim on pushing back the European legislation to some extent, and so it's quite tricky for clients here in Germany and Europe to fulfill the standards. On the one hand, the European or German legislator is defining for them, and on the other hand, not to be in a violation of other standards and other laws and regulations in these other countries of the world. And So this is part of what makes things very interesting at the moment, to help clients to navigate these different standards. Monitoring, of course, of new developments is also an essential part. And yeah, maybe you will see a similar situation, Veronica. I can imagine that you have similar issues with your clients at the moment you discussed, but maybe you can take it up from there.
Yes, greatly said. I think it's a good moment to have this discussion because the regulatory landscape is kind of keeps shifting under our feet, and some thresholds are basically renewed or simplified, and at the same time the enforcement in areas like greenwashing is about to intensify, and the new regulations coming into force. So yeah, that combination actually, like a moving regulatory target alongside with growing client interest, is a good momentum to discuss how it is managed in different parts of the world. And at least in Europe, the situation is quite intensive. So I really look forward to have this discussion with you. And personally, I am speaking from Poland. So the other representative from the EU.
Thank you, Christina.
Yes, hi, hello everyone. This is Christina. I'm actually in Manila right now, and I was telling everyone earlier how bad the weather is right now in the Philippines. So you might see me dropping off in this call a few times. But yeah, I agree with what Veronica and Erica said, that this is an interesting time for, especially for ESG regulations around the world, especially for us, like in some parts of Asia. I'm not saying all, but particularly in the Philippines. We're still trying to catch up with other neighboring countries, and even with other areas such as the EU, of course, who's been trailblazing this aspect of the legal advancements. What's interesting for our part is that since there are a number of regulatory developments in other parts of the world, our statutory compliance are just starting. So we can see the gaps that we might be able to address in the future. And we're trying to do that as part of the global supply chain, because the Philippines, as you know, we're not entirely a major part in the industries, but there are a number of relevant, I would say, areas that pass through our country. So even if our own regulations aren't that strong yet, we're forced to, in a way, comply as well with regulations from other parts of the world, just because we're part of that global supply chain. So I think this discussions that the ESG committee is trying to host right now is not just relevant, but also very educational, especially for some countries and some jurisdictions that are not as advanced. So thank you, and I hope everyone as well gets to interact and give us their insights about the topics that might be discussed during this, informal, as Pavi mentioned, cafe discussion about ESG.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. The way we wanted to structure today's discussion is firstly discuss what capabilities does an ESG practice need. So many of you on the call would want to develop this practice further. What capabilities are those? Second, where do we see the market opportunities, specifically in this side of the continent? And third, what are clients asking for today on their ESG requirements? In terms of capabilities, of course, there is a lot of corporate governance interplay that we see in India benefiting the ESG practice. Disputes, greenwashing, like Veronica mentioned, and climate litigation is a big aspect of the ESG practice. We operate our ESG practice on a hub and spoke model. So to speak, we have different practice areas who culminate their efforts together to create an ESG practice group. On the debt side specifically, clients are increasingly wanting to look at ESG-based debt securities or green bonds, which requires another set of compliance and one to issue annual reports to confirm that whatever fundings come in, that funding's actually been used for green purposes. And those end use of reports are able to then prove whether the additional coupon that a client is getting on its ESG securities in India, is that additional coupon a green premium or is it a brown discount? Similarly, private equity funds, wherever we are working with DFIs or funds where LPs have green commitments, are also increasingly looking at seeking ESG clearances before they are drawing down the checks for these ESG for any kind of investments. And similarly, there are aspects of supply chain which we are very deeply engaging with these days, specifically in India. To give you an example, the Xinjiang province in China is one of the largest provinces to be supplying cotton across the world. It manufactures about 60% of the cotton supply for the world. But this specific region's cotton is correlated with forced labor. Several EU nations and few years ago, even the United States of America had imposed ban on any cotton which was coming from this region, or in the alternate, they had to give a anti-forced labor commitment declaration that the cotton's not originating from forced labor. So from an MNC perspective, where we're representing MNCs who have businesses across different continents, across the global north and the global south, the supply chain aspect becomes increasingly important. What interestingly this year I have also been seeing, of course, this is as a result of the Reserve Bank of India's climate directives, is a lot of financial institutions are doing climate stress tests. They want to know that the bulk of their portfolio is not sitting in those areas where there are extreme climate events and extreme risks. So to speak about 3/4 of our districts in India are hotspots for extreme climate events. And accordingly, several financial institutions are now running extreme climate stress tests in respect of their portfolios. Fernando, hi. We just got started, but we would love for you to join in. Sorry, I think you're on mute.
First of all, excuse the delay. Zoom is not my favorite platform, not only of mine, but of my firm. So there are a set of restrictions there. But finally, we are here. First of all, thank you for joining. Thank you for taking part of this initiative of the ESG committee. I think it's a good idea for us to be together and to be able to not meet only once a year, but to connect in a more frequent basis. This is a great initiative of PAVI, which I think it's going to be an important development in our committee. We like to share developments in a regular basis, and above all, continue being in contact and sharing experiences, which is what I think makes IPBA what it is, a diverse group of legal practitioners from all around the globe. And I'm sure that you have been seeing in your corresponding jurisdictions a set of changes, developments, setbacks as well with regard to this matter. And in a while, after hearing the comments of Fabi and yourselves, I just want to share some insights from my region and in particular from my jurisdiction, which is Peru. So, Fabi, please carry on.
Sure. So, we just kind of structured the conversation around what capabilities does an ESG lawyer need. where are really the market opportunities and what are clients really asking for today. I was trying to give an Indian perspective of where we as a firm are building the ESG practice. Where are we seeing the client demands emanating from mostly? A lot of it also comes from listed entities in India, because Indian listed entities have a mandatory ESG reporting compliance for the top 1,000 listed entities. And there has been some amount of push and pull on the Indian ESG reporting as well, very similar to the EU. So to speak, the supply chain ESG diligence for these listed entities was earlier a mandatory requirement. And over the last 1 year, that has also been made a voluntary requirement. So that push and pull, we're seeing flow from the US to the EU and now to India as well. But I would still say we are moving forward than ever before. And a particular practice area which is ripe for monetizing for all of us lawyers is carbon credits and carbon removal. A lot of AI benefiting entities, the Metas and Facebooks of the world, while they would want to be carbon neutral, a lot of their energy consumption comes from data centers and data center infrastructure. In those contracts, we'll increasingly see commitments such as using potable water or no potable water to make sure that all the energy that a data center or an AI heavy entity is using, while it's not sitting in the entity, but it should not sit in its energy as well. So that's a very big aspect of our ESG practice that we're seeing in terms of demand from clients as well. We, of course, discussed about financial institutions wanting to run climate stress tests and extreme event stress tests. Similarly, in our part of the world, consumer companies are increasingly mindful about EPR commitments, which is extended producer responsibility commitments. Any brand owner, manufacturer, or importer has certain EPR commitments in India, which they have to comply with. And this pricing has to sit in the valuation model. If you are looking at ESG in an M&A part of a transaction, this also has to sit in the valuation of the company in terms of who's taking care of this costing on the entire EPR generation, production, and trade. I'll take a pause here. I'd love to hear what what other people, specifically our chair, co-chairs, vice chairs, are seeing in their jurisdictions in terms of practice areas which are most buzzing on the ESG side. So over to you.
Yeah, Pavi, I can give my German perspective on it, and maybe Thomas, you can then add some further thoughts on that, since you're also sitting in Germany. So, I mean, a lot of these things you have just described are totally relevant also from a German and European perspective. I mean, the supply chain regulation when it comes to forced labor, forbidden labor, and stuff like that is something which is very strictly regulated in Germany and the European Union, and even so, we see them some changes from the government to mitigate the burden, in particular reporting obligations for the companies. The key obligations and the key standards are still upheld, and I mean it is not only that it is upheld, but you can also see that there's a European criminal directive handed down in parallel, which makes it even more dangerous for the people making decisions in the companies. If they do the wrong decision, then there might be a personal criminal responsibility on their end if they're not complying with certain ESG standards and stuff like that. So we really see that it's kind of a dangerous mixture between, on the one hand, if you look at the statements of politicians, statements that give you the feeling, if you're not digging too deep into the details of all these regulations, that things are maybe not so hot as they were 2 years or so before, but still, I think, it's, as I said, a very critical time because a lot of regulations are upheld. And in some extent, it's even getting worse. For example, we have a new packaging regulation, which has become effective now in August, with a lot of new standards and compliance requirements. We have new regulations when it comes to civil law and civil liability, right to repair directive, for example. We have innovation of the product liability directive. And if you look at these, a lot of these changes are also driven by ESG-related motives. As I said, a lot of new laws and legislation in place. So a lot of these things you have just described, I can totally also see from a European perspective. Although the greenwashing claims is something I would maybe add from our end, is also something which is at the moment very relevant for a lot of clients. Keeps our practice of unfair competition very busy because we have a new directive in this regard as well, the EMCO directive. Then we have also PFAS litigation coming more and more into place, which is also relevant in this region of the world. In addition to the climate actions we now see for some time, where some test cases are pushed forward, we will see in which direction they will head. And when it comes to financing and also the restructuring of companies, we see a lot of M&A activities in this regard as well. So companies separating their brown business from their green business, for example, and so also a lot of things in this regard as well. But maybe Thomas, what is your view on that? Do you also see the same issues in your client base, or maybe additional points I haven't mentioned yet?
Yes, thank you, Eric, for passing on the word. Hello, everybody. Allow me to add some snippets or things that I've seen over the last couple of months. I think one thing I would like to highlight, my feeling is that the discussion on ESG is moving a bit more in the direction of circular economy, which in certain extent is just a different label for the things we used to discuss under the label of ESG for the last 2 or 3 years. But I think that's a certain development and a different way of looking at the things. Then the second observation I would like to make, probably some of you know, my background is more a corporate and banking and finance law background. And therefore, I try to closely monitor what the ECB, the European Central Bank, is doing. And so far, the European Central Bank has been, I would say, a strong promoter of green finance and ESG-related regulation. And what we have seen now, for example, is that the ECB started to fine banks who fail to comply with ESG-related risk assessments, which is obligatory for banks under the regulation of the ECB. So these are maybe small signs that ESG regulation is still alive, and it is working on a day-to-day basis. But I think, well, most of you might know that the president of the ECB, Christine Lagarde, her term ends next year. So let's see what her successor thinks about ESG. Maybe that we will start to see a a shift when the new president is in place. In terms of what happens in our different or in our ESG practice, I think everything that has to do with green building, green lease is still a big issue, and it brings a lot of business to our firm. Also, what Eric mentioned in terms of M&A related to green technologies is still at a very good level. Also, there's and that is maybe the last point I want to make. There's a certain type of investor in Germany, not necessarily impact investors, but let's say on the verge to impact investment. And this group is they are very convinced that investing money has something to do with making the world cleaner and better and saving the climate. And this group is continuously trying to put the money in these sectors. So I think that's also a quite interesting observation. Over to you or to anyone who wants to comment.
Maybe Veronika, you can say a few words also about the European perspective or particularities in your jurisdiction.
Yes, I wanted to jump in with that, but in this second, I noticed that Abhishek is raising his hand. So maybe I would like to give floor to Abhishek to hear another perspective.
Yeah, hi, I'm Abhishek Tripathi. I'm a partner at Sarthak Advocates and Solicitors. We are a Delhi and Mumbai-based firm. So I think, in terms of, because I think Pavi started with the question as to what kind of skills or capabilities do us as lawyers need to sort of build this practice. And I think she has very beautifully explained how this is being used very well, especially by the capital markets, where fundraising, debt capital markets in particular, is where it has a very good use case. But I think what we are also seeing, I mean, ESG is basically, it's three different practices merged into one, as far as we see. And obviously capital markets is one area where we are sort of seeing all the three converging, right? But there are, as we see, there are also distinct, capabilities that sometimes clients need on each of these, elements of ESG separately. For example, for environment, you'll have clients who would need specific capabilities to manage, whether it's general corporate advisory or, requirements for, some kind of consultation with respect to specifically environmental laws. And that would come in a variety of ways. I mean, we are getting queries on what is the impact of CBAM on Indian, exporters, for example, right? And that's distinctly environmental, or rather we are advising some, clients on what is the impact of joint credit mechanism between India and Japan, for example. So I think those kind of, specific capabilities, which are not generic ESG, but very, very focused specific capabilities with respect to environmental laws or environmental legislations, or even carbon trading, or, which is in fact evolving in India as we speak. I mean, the rules are being framed by, under the Energy Conservation Act. So I think we also need to look at what are the specific capabilities in each of the three areas that, that we need to build. And if there's a scope to build a practice around those specific capabilities as well. Because, like for example, our firm, we distinctly stay away from capital markets. So debt capital markets is not something that we are, going to advise on. But at the same time, we do a fair amount of advisory on the environmental side of it, where we are advising clients on compliances with for example, EPR, that's also extended producers, responsibility. That's something that we advise on. So I think those are areas that also sort of need one needs to look at. And within ESG, I think also there's a fair amount of governance, which is a distinct practice area in itself, right? I mean, corporate governance as such, or compliance with, for example, prevention of sexual harassment at workplace legislations or regulations. So I think we perhaps also need to split this greater set of ESG into subsets and see where one can sort of pitch specific capabilities. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Veronica, I don't know how to put my hand up, so I'll just talk now. Uh, Thank you for the input of everyone. Is very interesting, and I think it's also interesting to see how the developments take place in different sides of the world. So we have spoken about Asia, we have spoken about Europe. I'll bring you some insights about Latin America and Peru. First of all, in this side of the world, we're just starting to develop a set of regulations in connection to ESG or sustainability or circular economy, as my good friend Thomas mentioned. But we're doing it at a very accelerated pace. Now, in a jurisdiction like Peru, you may have plenty norms, regulations, laws, directives, but the difference is in connection to how do you enforce them. Okay, so at least now we're setting the legal framework for those purposes in a set of sectors of the economy, but what we are still lacking are mechanisms of enforcement so that companies truly fulfill their what are becoming starting to become legal obligations. One particular development that is in the region has taken place in Mexico, Chile, and quite recently in Peru is not necessarily legal, comes from the accounting. So there are these international finance accounting rules, and they have a set of rules. They are called S1, S2, that are related to sustainability and with climate change. This has nothing to do with law, but the main importance of this is that this is allowing anyone in the public to look in depth on what each company is doing with regard to those topics, because it's going to be part of their financial statements. You are not requested by law to do much things in connection to sustainability or climate action, but you have to disclose if you do it or not and how much you do it. So this is an exposure that each and every company in Peru, and later I'm going to tell you which companies, um, would be would need to disclose. So with that information in the world of today, as today that we have so many people that simply want to share information and insights of companies, now it's going to be very easy for someone with interest on this topic to evaluate if company A or company Z are doing efforts with regard to this matter. And just that development, I think, is very important because companies will know that whatever they do in that matter is going to be able to be accessed by anyone. Of course, who are the targets of these companies? The most important ones are those regulated by the Securities Commission, that is the capital markets, and also those very large companies like banks, insurance companies, pension funds, administrators. So those are going to be the first ones who need to disclose that information. But the regulation doesn't stop there. They want to also promote this to companies with certain amount of levels of sales, so to speak, or of income. So of course, I've been listening how important it is, and the most of the impact is trying to take place in capital markets. But I think that although that's the way it's going, to the extent that the aspiration of ESG is much more broad, you cannot stop there. I mean, and this scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 um, does mean that your suppliers are also important. Pavi was just mentioning about the supply chain regulations in India. Well, it doesn't matter at the end if you impose some regulations to the capital markets companies, because at the end of the day, they have to pull their suppliers to also be ESG compliant, so to speak. So that's a general comment, and that's something that is quite a development in my country, because before companies were, oh yes, what is this ESG? Is it important? No one is going to know. At the end, I'm just going to say that I do, but I don't, or the other way around. But truth is that now it's something that at least is in the radar of my country, and as I mentioned before, also of Mexico and Chile, and possibly other countries are going to follow. That's a general comment, and I also have a provocative question, which is I was 4 or 5 years ago in a presentation regarding ESG, when ESG was even more novel, at least in this part of the world. And one of the comments by one of the lawyers, which I always thought was right, and is related to what you, Abhineshek, has just mentioned right now, is if there truly is if we can say that exists an ESG lawyer. Back at the time, the proposition of this person was that that role did not really exist. I have my doubts now if it exists or not, because as you have just said recently, I mean, corporate governance, supply chains, um, human rights, all are aspects who already have specialists which look into those matters, who do not have a clue of what ESG is. So I open now the floor to you guys with this provocative question. And what do you think? Do you think that there's a category of new lawyer which is an ESG lawyer? Pavi, what do you think? Do you consider yourself an ESG lawyer?
No, I feel I'm a half ESG lawyer because because the practice really runs on a hub and spoke model. What I can do with my M&A lens, I cannot do from a litigation perspective, and I cannot do from a defense perspective. I can cover a lot of other aspects. So a lot of practice areas do come together to make a ESG team at any law firm. Veronica also has something to add.
Yes, I would like to follow up because at one hand, in our firm, ESG practice is a cross-practice model when we have where we have lawyers from different practices, because there is no a person that can cover all the aspects. But at the same time, when there are questions related to the ESG regulations like CSDDD, CSRD, they all come to me. So I must say that there is someone that can be called ESG lawyer, although ESG lawyer, it does not mean that this person cover all aspects of ESG. So I would say that this person knows what is going on in the regulations. This person is I would say qualified in the regulations that are new, but that touch other aspects of law as well. So although it is not, someone who can cover all the topics on her or his own, there is new knowledge that needs to be acquired. And this is what, in my opinion, makes an ESG lawyer.
Good.
Is there anyone that would like to follow up on this? What's your opinion?
I would like the thoughts of Mr. Swisla.
I think there are good lawyers and very good lawyers. Probably no ESG lawyers.
Okay, good. Good.
Just to add, sorry, just to add what Veronica said, I think it's a general practice which everyone is kind of doing and merging it. And then when it comes to compliances, I think that's when the ESG specialist who would be advising on those specific compliances, depending who's your client, whether those are listed companies or what bracket are you coming in. Whereas in India, our ESG compliances as such are basically targeted only to the listed companies. It's not to the unlisted companies. So though you may be doing in India, the CSR, what started in 2013 in the Companies Act. So ESG is a broader concept. It originated in India from CSR compliances. So the majority of companies in India do undertake CSR. There are some proportion what you're supposed to do. The ESG compliances are basically reporting, and everything happens to the listed companies. So I think the ESG compliance, when you look at the listed company, the capital market lawyers will take care of that. Or when you're having specific, reporting, what you're having in Europe, that will be an ESG lawyer. Whereas in India, it is still a very general practice. I mean, ESG will be a part of our practice area. Like right now, I'm advising a French client on, some carbon credits in India. So they are doing, I'm doing currently an due diligence of the Indian entity to understand how those carbon credits will eventually be transferred. So I think the due diligence part is being done by us. Supply chain duty is also coming to India when you are looking at the carbon credits. And then, I mean, as a general practice, then specifically as you grow, I mean, as it's, crystallizes further, there will be more, fine tuning to the term ESG lawyers in the long run, I think. So right now it will be general. That's my view. I think it will kind of sharpen up further over the years.
Good. And what's your experience, guys? This is again for everyone. What's your experience in connection to conflict or clashes with other practitioners who think, "Hey, this is my area. I mean, why are you interfering with this?" Have you seen that in your practice?
If I may go first, I feel so Abhishek, why don't you?
No, no, good. Go ahead. I'm good. Please.
Not mostly amongst lawyers, but I'd see this between lawyers and Big Four practitioners or those from the Big Four, because that's a very big a price touch point. They're definitely able to offer much more economies of scale to a same subset of, let's say, ESG compliances that we run and what they run. So I feel that's where a big conflict of interest exists. And definitely they have a better leverage in terms of price point.
Yeah, so I mean, if I may, I think I do see some degree of conflict when you look at the broader umbrella of what's included in ESG. For example, ESG also includes employment, right? And there are specialized employment lawyers who know about employment better than an environment lawyer, for example, right? And it's the same with corporate governance. For example, people who are doing even for listed company compliances, they would know about listing requirements or SEBI's regulations, etc., securities regulations, etc., when it comes to governance. So I think there are distinct, and as far as I can see, there are distinct capabilities within ESG. And like Pavi said, perhaps one way to do it is that you work with a hub and spoke model where somebody gets the queries directed at them and they kind of curate the right kind of advice by bringing or marshalling the right kind of resources. But it'll be difficult to find somebody who's all three merged into one. I mean, uh, I I cannot think of that happening. And obviously, there will be in larger setups, the conflicts will be obvious, right? So, for example, environment lawyers may say that the employment lawyers may say, why are the environment lawyers treading into our space? In smaller setups like ours, the conflicts are lesser because we sometimes do everything. So we tend to have the conflicts. We are able to manage the conflicts. And what Pavi said is actually a very genuine problem that as far as environment is concerned, there are the big four and there are specialized consultants who are able to offer a much broader bouquet of services when it comes to environmental compliance. Not only are they able to advise generally on law, but they are also able to manage the rest of it, which is managing the compliances, preparing reports, etc., of the kind that are required for environmental compliances. And yeah, I mean that's certainly a challenge. One way that we have sort of tried to address that is to sort of tie up with some of those consultants by saying, by doing a joint pitch of some sorts where we are able to say that, technical components or the compliance components, which sometimes the lawyers may not be the best or the most efficient or cost, efficient at, can be done by those organizations, whereas the legal interpretations or the legal advice part of it is managed by the law firm. But yeah, but doing that sort of substantially curtails your price or rather your revenue in the process. So I think I kind of second what Pavi said on that.
Mr. Wagner, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we have a cross-functional group of lawyers here dealing with ESG matters, and I do not see any form of competition here, but everyone has its personal background and personal view, because it's a labor lawyer or it's a litigator or it's a corporate lawyer or whatever. And I think it's very interesting to bring in the different perspectives, and only if you do that, you can really provide best advice for your clients. And I think an ESG lawyer, Thomas said they are good and better lawyers or something they like. And I think it's very helpful, if you have a good awareness of the different issues that are going on in the ESG field. And so this is why we also have an ESG group in our firm. It's kind of an industry group. It's not really an industry, of course, but it's structured like an industry group, like automotive group or aviation group and stuff like that. And so knowing what different types of laws are handed down, what are certain standards in the industry and stuff like that, is, of course, I think helpful, because that gives you the edge of bringing in colleagues at a certain point where you might have a problem. You are not personally the best one to solve it, because you have a different background spoken from a certain practice area of law. And I mean, the competition between different kinds of service providers I see as well. So as I said before, I mean, we have the big auditing firms, and we have also a lot of startups here in Germany trying to, by using tech solutions to help companies, for example, in fulfilling their reporting obligations and stuff like that. And of course, to some extent, they also provide, I would say, legal advice. They would disagree with that, and they would disagree with that because they're not allowed to provide legal advice, of course. But in the end, they provide solutions for the client, and so to some extent, this is of course overlapping with the tasks we render for our clients. But I think you see this in other fields as well. So if I do a lot of product safety and product liability issues as well, and there you also have big service providers dealing with recalls and communication agencies and stuff like that, and they always have to some extent an overlap to other professions. Yeah, so I think it's something that's okay, and it's part of the game. Yeah, that you have competition between different type of service providers in this field as well.
Good, good. I think we're almost in time. So just a final question for everyone, and I'll start by asking my own question, which is what makes us distinct? What makes us? I won't call us ESG lawyers, but lawyers with much interest in connection to ESG matters. What do you think that makes us distinct from a corporate lawyer, from a tax lawyer, from a labor lawyer, from an environmental lawyer? What is that feature that that we have to highlight and use in order to sell our services? And as I said, I'm going to reply myself because I've given some thought to that. First of all, as it's natural, is the focus, right? Our focus should be to that our advice leads our clients to consider themselves as ESG compliant as it's possible within reasonable ground, within reasonable limits, because as I always say, ESG can be absolutely demanding and can be like a sort of black hole at some point. So you need to see where to prioritize and where to go as far as possible and where do it in the right proportion, whatever policies you have within your company. But above all, I think that an ESG and a lawyer with interest in ESG matters has to have the right questions, not necessarily the right answers, because in order to have the right answers, sometimes you need to rely in lawyers who have more experience in certain area of law, like labor law, for instance, like a corporate lawyer, like an environmental lawyer. So I think that just giving the right questions for a company to decide or for a general counsel to decide in what direction should the company be moving puts you a step ahead with regard to ESG matters. And then collaborate with whoever you need, whether external counsel, internal counsel, but they may help us get the right answers every time. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I may, I don't know if
Your
am
hands
I
up.
audible? Yeah, yes,
Yes,
sorry.
yes.
Yes, I was saying I think you've highlighted the right sort of attributes. I think the real ability of, or rather the real distinguishing feature for an ESG lawyer will be to have a 360-degree high-level view of an issue, and your ability to really identify who to tap and, to identify or rather to predict, what is the general direction the question or the query or the problem is likely to take, and who really to sort of tag along or rather bring along, to provide the advice to the client. So I think the distinguishing feature will be our ability to take a high level 360-degree view. And I also had one small interesting question. Has anybody here, I mean, we are calling ourselves as ESG lawyers, has anyone ever been asked by any client as to where we stand as a firm or as lawyers on our own ESG compliances, if at all, or in letter or in spirit? I mean, obviously, I don't know if any of us have any legal obligations to comply, but ethical, moral, or whatever we consider to be our responsibility to. You've been asked?
Yes. I had that.
Okay. Yeah.
We walk the talk as well. So we are the first Indian law firm to get their own ESG audit done. So that when I'm trying to sell this practice, I can also very proudly say that we've done our own ESG audit as well.
In fact, we had one of our clients ask for our ESG policy a few years back. So thanks to them, we actually created a policy with different sections for how we are environmentally responsible and how we make sure that we comply with all sort of human rights standards and everything. So I think we had a very detailed discussion back then. But I think those are the only, I think, couple of times we've been asked, but I don't think we've ever been asked after that.
Just to add, I'm not sure if you know, but there's an international organization called UIA, which is a Union Internationale des Avocats. It is headquartered in Paris. So I serve on the executive committee of UIA. So at UIA, we have adopted an ESG resolution. So as members of UIA, we can adopt that and what policies each individual lawyer is undertaking in their law firms, whether it's an individual smaller practice or larger practice. I mean, see, Ketan and Co can go ahead and do an ESG audit and do that. But as like smaller firms, when you're looking at, I mean, I run a smaller firm. So when we look at that, when you are signatories to that ESG resolution, you adopt that resolution in your firm. So when you are talking to somebody or informing, yes, we are, doing an X amount of work towards that ESG. I think that plays an important role. One is adaptability to the new trends coming in and how we are informing, because the people are getting more and more conscious of ESG obligations now. So if you're advising, especially when you're advising foreign clients, so this is a big role. I mean, when you're adopting a resolution or your organization is doing an ESG audit, as Pavi mentioned, I think that's going to take big shape now. It's going to shape up things in India and overseas, obviously.
Good. Someone else, we're conscious of time, that wants to share final thoughts in connection to this? No. So, Javi, why don't we just wrap up, please?
It was wonderful to have everybody join the conversation. And as we thought at the beginning, we don't want this to be a monologue. It was wonderful that all of us could contribute to the conversation and see the direction of travel of ESG. This is a part of the very many series of similar conversations we will have through the year. And the ESG committee and the leadership of the ESG committee would love to discuss more with you through this year. So thank you all for joining us.
Yes, and we have a list of very interesting topics that we have been developing within the leadership of the committee, and I can tell you all of them are very exciting. We just wanted to start with this to make a sort of kickoff presentation of what we're planning, but we really hope that you can keep being part of these cafes, and please feel free to ask other people to join. It will be more than nice to increase the talk on these matters with as many people as possible. Okay, so thank you very much. Have a lovely week.
Thank you too.
Thanks.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.